Madhavni sir to kindly take over this session and deliver the lecture. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. But there are still, I think it is 14:57. So should we wait for 3 more minutes or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
3
Yes, sir.
minutes.
I guess you should wait, sir. It is not yet 3 o'clock.
Exactly.
Good afternoon, sir. Jagdish.
Jagdish, sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Namaskara, sir. Jagdish.
Namaskara, sir. Seeing how many people ride scooters and still are speaking on the phone, we as a country, we respect a lot of time, you see. It's important. So we'll wait for 3. ಸರ್ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಜಗದೀಶ್ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ವಿಠಲ್ ರಾವ್ ಅವರೆಲ್ಲ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ನಂಗೆ ನರ್ವಸ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ.
ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಲಿ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ?
ವಿಠಲ್ ರಾವ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ನರ್ವಸ್ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್ ಒಪ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೋದು.
ನೀವು ಬಂದ್ರು ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
ನಾವ್ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಸರಿ ಆಯ್ತು. ಅವ್ರು ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಹೆದರಿಕೆ. ವಿಠಲ್ ರಾವ್ ಪ್ರೊಫೆಸರ್ ಬಂದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಹೆದರಿಕೆ.
ವಿಠಲ್ ರಾವ್ ಬಂದಾಗಿದೆ.
ಏಜ್ ನಾನ್ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಬೈದ್ಬಿಡ್ಬೋದು, ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ. ವಿಠಲ್ ರಾವ್ ಒಬ್ರನ್ನ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಬೈದ್ರೆ ನೀವು ತಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. ಇವನೇನೋ ಹುಚ್ಚ, ಇವನಿಗೇನು ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ಕೊಂಡು.
ವಿಠಲ್ ರಾವ್ ಬಂದಾಗಿದೆ ಸರ್.
ಗೊತ್ತು ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರು ಆಗ್ಲೇನೆ. ಅದೇ when you are waiting, the minute goes slowly.
Slow. Yes. See, time has no arrow. Time is not defined.
Yes. Yeah.
Sir, it is a very loaded definition.
Yeah.
Mathematician.
I used to have a very senior friend, many more years older than me, who is no more. One Professor Venkatraman, who was at Madurai University and later started the department at Central University, Hyderabad.
Yeah.
Whenever he came to Bangalore, he would come and stay with me. He would come, he had these typical panchakache, vesti, kurmi and all that, juttu and all. He would come, put his bag on the sofa, put both his legs on the sofa, sit, ask my wife to get a cup of coffee and said, Vittal Rao, let us discuss what is time. Every time that was the starting.
In fact, sir, Professor Murthy, there should be a lecture and time, really. I mean, a series of them. It will be fantastic.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll do that.
Yeah, we will see.
So really, some physicists, some philosophers, everybody.
Yeah. Philosophers and thermodynamics people. And, yeah. So it is 3.
Yes, you can start, sir.
Yeah, okay. So good afternoon to everyone. And I'm going to talk about trends in university research, some concerns. And you may consider this either in a very lighter way and dismiss, or consider it as very loaded and call me back by names, no problem. But do react and see what we have to say, what I have to say in this lecture. Okay, yeah. The very original intent of a university, and here I have shown a picture of aerial picture of a place from, I think it is near Varanasi, the famous Buddhist university. And from those days, continuing from Nalanda and others, these days I am obligated to start a university lecture with Nalanda's name anyway. So given this, the intent was that you have to pursue excellence in whatever we do. And we produce knowledge, then we have to be open and universal. In fact, those of you who have read a little bit about the ancient culture, about 1000 AD, there were a lot of Islamic scholars. And in Sanskrit, we have a very respectful name called Yavanacharya for them, because they were very open to listen to them, Yavanacharyas. So that was being open and universal. And it has to be, we have to act for a general good. You cannot make it very specific to any particular group, and we have to be impartial. There are many other things, but these are some of the things which is practiced by university, and university by definition did a lot of research. Now, given this, why do I have this concern now? It started actually in a innocuous manner. It was triggered by a researcher presentation recently by a researcher, and I listened to this carefully for 1.5 hours. What I found was it had many components, a lot of different things to be done. It had relatively a large team across the country. Then it had a large investment, relatively large investment. Probably it ran to 20, 30 crores or so. The downside of that, this is purely my judgment, it hardly had any really research. It was mostly small incremental work to improve this and that and put them together, which is okay, which is good, but to label it as great research is a problem. Then the presenter, therefore, showed himself to be more a manager of research rather than a researcher himself. And the goal seemed well thought out. There was no problem with the research topic itself. It was very well thought out, but it was a repeat of some similar work which has been going on for the last 15 years. So given this, suddenly it came as a shock to me as to what the hell are we doing? We are spending a lot of money. We have a lot of people. We have a lot of different kind of things. And in spite of that, we seem to have a research work which is characterized by what I have listed here. So I went back and started looking at what are the outcomes of a great research project. One is, very often it starts a new area. People typically start a new area with great research. Then starting impactful new applications is another thing that happens very often. I'll give a few examples as we go along. Then we start a new pedagogy, a new method of teaching, a new completely different kind of things. And then very impactful and very scholarly publications are normally an outcome of such research, and contribution to society and the general good. This is hard to judge, but over a period of time, some of the research works have produced results 100 years later, some of them 10 years later, but generally they have contributed to society and general good. And generally, this great research is open to everyone. Now, having seen this, I was just looking at what are the dimensions of a university. What are the problems that we are involved with? One is we have to secure funding to carry out research. Research is not cheap. We have to spend a lot of money. We have to get a lot of money. So we have to secure funding. That's one of the important aspects in a university. Second, we have to respond to dynamics of research careers. In the sense, all of you who are present today, you know that you are not teaching what you learned from your universities. During the BE, ME, or PhDs, very often we have to change completely and respond to the research areas that are happening and teach the corresponding areas. Then we have to also, university has to cater to the career growth parts of researchers. We'll have to see that they have a path, they can sort of grow as researchers. Then, of course, the university will have to produce publications. It has to have patents. It has to have any other kind of impact. I'll mention a few of them if time permits, the other impact as we go along. Then the university has to contribute to expertise in a given area, innovations in a given area, and relevance of a given area. By expertise, I mean, for somebody like, for instance, Richard Feynman was involved in analyzing why the spaceship exploded. And when you simply ask a question with nothing known about how the spaceship exploded, it requires a tremendous amount of expertise, which means a lot of logic, a lot of experience, a lot of different kind of things in order to even suggest probably what is going wrong. So universities also contribute to this expertise, and then of course, innovations and to relevance. So let's look at each one of these topics in some detail. Research funding and costs is what we will take up first. So funding a university will happen in the following manner today. We participate in large international projects. I'll show you a few examples. We participate in large national projects, so that brings us money. Then we do independent funding proposals to different universities. It's not necessarily a part of a large international or a national project, but we have our own ideas and we propose it in certain contexts. Then, unfortunately, there is very little funding for suo motu research. In the sense, suppose I want to start a topic in my institute and I want to put some money and nobody is willing to come forward because they don't see any value in it, then there is a relatively small amount of funding available for this. This is particularly true in the soft sciences like social science and psychology and other things. Then topics, the other thing that happens in funding is that the topics on which you propose typically are on the current ecosystem, not really necessarily on the curiosity-based research. That has more or less gone. In fact, very recently, about a year back, I was asking one of the top researchers from one of the American universities as to what is the criterion for that person to apply for funding. He frankly said, I see what are all funded by the NSF last year, and I go by that and apply for the funding in the same area. And if I see declining trend in a particular area for funding, then I do not apply for that. So The person may have a lot of curiosity, may want to do a lot of things, but in order to win the funding, they apply projects in an area which is sort of in what I call an ecosystem. So that is presently some big whips define what a good thing is, and then you just go based on that. Then career imperatives has taken over the main drive for research. I mean, I'm talking about, let's say 100, 150 years back, or even say 30, 40 years back, or maybe 50 years. I'm sorry if you hear a mewing of a cat. It is our cat which also wants to listen to the lecture. So the career imperatives has taken over as the main drive, and you apply for funding, you do research, which actually leads to career growth. Now, examples of large projects which have brought a lot of money, staggering amount of money. For instance, is a Large Hadron Collider in Geneva. The total investment on that till now on the machine has been about $20 billion. And if you consider all the money spent on researchers on this, it would be one of the projects which tends to be around $40 to $50 billion. So very large project. And there are mechanisms to get funding. There are mechanisms to join. Then you must have heard about the gravitational wave detector, LIGO, again, a multi-billion-dollar project. Nuclear detector, again, several of them, multi-billion. Then the xenon-based detectors, it's actually this project is something really, for me, I mean, difficult to imagine, because each one of them has a tank in which there is liquid xenon. So that is at minus 240 degrees or so. And it contains staggering amounts of xenon. That is xenon about, I don't know, 50 tons of xenon. So, I mean, these kind of things take a lot of money. And it's been going on for several years. And then proton decay detectors, Human Genome Project. Human Genome Project was very interesting in biology. It took almost 10 years to get the first result. And then after they got the first result, things started becoming useful. It was one of those projects where a lot of money spent in the beginning was well worth spending, because it spawned a lot of different things. Then right now, there is a huge investment in Europe on reverse engineering the brain, which means to understand the brain. About 6, 7 years back, €1 billion project was started, and many people are interested in this. And then, of course, you know, the Hubble telescope. Just last week, it again went into a little oblivion, but that has been into space. It has been repaired. A lot of things have been done on the Hubble telescope and the Mars rover. Now, in the national context, we are not too much behind. We have satellites by ISRO, which is each, in a way, it is a research project by itself. And a lot of universities are involved. GMRT in Pune, one of the large projects, where again, it is purely a study project. Then we have a 9-inch telescope. And then we have a LIGO India, which is coming up. We are going to set up a LIGO in India. And then we have neutrino detectors. We have BARC doing a lot of interesting things. And then in the engineering, we have the so-called Indian microprocessor, where a lot of people are putting a lot of money. So what you can do is, you belong to one of these two research groups. I just want to include that the small research, what I mean by this, which is also going on aplenty in universities, it is generally based on individuals in a small group. Often they are just research students and a few postdocs struggling for money. Many of them may not have enough money at all. And fortunately, unlike Western countries, if there is a research student, the student's stipend is at least paid by the government. So to that extent, we are slightly better off than some of the Western universities, where if a faculty member wants to have a small research group, that person will have to find money to support their own students. We are slowly moving towards that paradigm, but nevertheless, at the moment, we are okay. That there are these numbers of the small research is a very small number, and it has a large scale impact. And sometimes they have a large scale impact, but such impacts are probably less than 1 in 10 in a decade. If you see really a small group and it came up with some big idea which changed the world, is very, very low. Then it is usually this kind of small research is also recognized by awards like Nobel, Turing, Field Medal, Copley Medals, etc. But then other than that, they don't have too much funding. Often they are poorly supported by funding agencies. There is almost no money available for them. Now, some of the features of large projects are the following. They are tied tremendously to politics and government. Those of you who have followed from the time of the astrophysics project in We had one in Kodaikanal and then Ooty, and then later in GMRT and so on. You can see actually the people who sort of brought up these projects, they have got to play politics rather than we do any physics. And they have to carry conviction, and it is not easy to carry a scientific conviction with the kind of people we have everywhere. Please don't record this and tell them. Today, we have the whole bunch of them meeting about various things. To tell them that you don't know about science would be a wrong thing to say, at least politically. But that is what the fact is. You cannot simply start a large project without tremendous amount of politics and government. And very large investments are involved. Otherwise, it is also both ways. It is not worth politicking if you don't have a large investment. And if you have a large investment, you have to do politics. Then huge teams. CERN, for instance, that is the Large Hadron Collider, has thousands of physicists. I think the latest number is about 12,000. 12,000 physicists are involved. Some of them paid, some of them are from different universities and so on. And long gestation and long operation. I think the first proposal for CERN happened in probably 1973 or so. And it took about 2 decades to secure funding. Then it started setting up in 1994. And then its first real results, which is eye-catching, happened in 2002. So you are talking about 30 years. And now it has to live for a long time. And there are multiple applications usually for such large projects. And it produces large number of publications, but also kindly look at one of the CERN publications. The publication will be 2 paragraphs long, and the number of authors will be about 25 pages. So that is the kind of publication they produce. Because if you have 12,000 scientists working on this project, you don't want to sort of leave out anyone who is even remotely responsible. And if you want to do that, you have publications and then large number of people. And by necessity, such projects are very hierarchical. Then there is a project manager and then so on. And very often the finance person is different, administrator is different, and there's a management team. And lots of academic politics and small clubs get formed. And there is a very limited scope for any personal contribution. After all, you are working for a large project, you are told that you are like these 3 lines of code, and that's all about you do. Now, on the other side, if you take no funding small projects, you have also exemplary examples. Peter Higgs, for instance, he did something in 1963, which earned him a Nobel Prize in 2013, almost 50 years later. And Peter Higgs was about to lose his job because his 1963 paper and what he did and what he spawned was considered actually not very important. In fact, in 1980, there is a correspondence from his university where people debated whether his tenure should be denied to him. So this is what happens sometimes for so-called small group research. In fact, it was not even a group. He and his students, they did some work, and then we now know what it is. I'll show you one more example at a later point in time. Grothendieck, the famous mathematician, he left mathematics because he was partially funded by military. Where does this come from? You remember that universities have to be impartial, and then they have to cater to a larger good. The moment you say we do military projects, it can be considered a larger good, but a man like Grothendieck, who was a pacifist, he just quit the university because he could not stand any kind of a funding by a military, even though it was a small amount. Gregory Perelman, he actually, I don't know where he is now. I mean, he has an address in some place, but he was such a great mathematician, but he was very unhappy with his peers because of their greed and conformity to establishment. Einstein mostly worked when he was a patent clerk. I mean, all his papers were written at that time. Schrodinger, he had no stable job when he was inventing wave mechanics. Then there is one William Fan, who is not well known at all. And he actually wanted to do a single crystal germanium in nothing, I mean, in a lab like Bell Labs. And then his boss threatened him that he will be dismissed if he continues working on that. He didn't even ask for money finally. He went around begging people to give him some small machinery here and there. And he was said, you are employed here to do something else, and then you will be dismissed if you continue working on the single crystal germanium. Happily for him, 2 years later, somebody said that I need badly single crystal germanium. Everyone woke up and they said there was one Bill Fan, who was a madman doing germanium. Go and find out if he still has a crystal. So I mean, unless you are lucky, this can happen. Then Nikola Tesla, he did a lot of things, but then he had a very crafty opponent in Thomas Edison, and then he was done in by him. And Nikola Tesla almost died a madman. So the two extremes that I showed, you have large projects. If you happily belong to that, your funding is reasonable, you can do a lot of work, but there is no question of pursuing your passion, pursuing your interest, pursuing your curiosity. Very little of your own personal things can be expressed. On the other hand, you can go to the other extreme where you start your own work. There's a lot of passion, a lot of interest, probably publications. So there are downsides like your publication will be rejected. You may even be threatened to be dismissed and so on. So we have this kind of a thing in a university right now. If you look at some of the people who did a lot of work individually and then spawned new areas, then you have examples in engineering like OFDM. Diffie and Hellman's 1976 paper started a whole new game in encryption. And that is something fantastic that happened. And signal processing, people like Cooley, Tukey, and Kalman, they created new waves. And then integrated circuits were started by a small group in those days, RCI Research Lab, which became TI and so on. Then CRISPR more recently was pursued by 2-3 engineers, happily many of them women, and it is now where it is, and DNA decoding and so on. So what has happened is, irrespective of whether it is a large project or a self-driven project, new areas have been spawned by a lot of research work. And there are also a lot of new impactful applications like magnetoresistance resistance. It leaped from 0.1 GB to 20 TB storage almost overnight because of their research. Blue LED, both of them got Nobel Prizes, saving 25% of world energy. It's not a small deal. Then optical fiber, and it is a leap from 0.1 Gbps to 100 Gbps speed, happened again, say engineering new application, OFDM, internet, and free telephony and so on. So what has happened is, on one side, we have all these complicated research structures, but they have generated new areas, and then there has been a lot of extension of knowledge. String theory has advanced, and standard model. I mean, people who thought that this math is no use has found a lot of use in string theory. And when you read about string theory, you don't know whether it is really pure math or pure physics. I mean, it's sort of that kind of an extension. And network theory, which has evolved from the age-old KCL and KVL, AI and ML from statistics, which has really revolutionized the world, and of course, neuroscience, which is slowly leading to the so-called understanding of the cell. And small telescopy, which started as basic experiments, has now led to astrophysics. So the kind of knowledge extension that is happening, that has happened, is also extensive. Now, the big surprise about all this, I said, so then you can ask, why are you concerned about university research? You started with that and you're giving only positive things. The big surprise is, all these are perhaps 1% of what we have done. I am being generous. I think Professor Vittalrao would say 0.05% from what I have heard him say. Yes, sir, it's about that kind of a thing. But I'm being generous and say, okay, let's say 1% of our work. And the other 99% is what I'm concerned. And this 99% of the research has not produced any of the things that I mentioned earlier, even remotely. So this is the concern. We are putting a lot of money, we are putting a lot of human resources, we are building buildings, then we are claiming that we are great, then we are saying that money that everyone is giving is not enough. We are doing a lot of this different kind of things, but still the research now is held by 99% of this other group, which is simply, I'm sorry to say, useless. Please note that this includes me. What I have done, I am not very proud about so far, but then I have a defense for that I will not bother you. But then this is what it is. So what are these 99% people doing? It is used only for career advancement, for belonging to a club of mutual admiration. Look at any of the societies that you have, and these societies have a lot of mutual admiration and they belong to a club. And then it is heavy politicking for funds, recognition, power, and position. And then on a technical side, most of these 99%, they repeat applications of some principle that they have developed over the last 5 or 6 years. So I have seen in my area, a lot of applications of queuing, a lot of applications of optimization, a lot of applications of machine learning and deep learning, without basically contributing anything to the basic understanding of any of this. Somebody did a lot of queuing theory that was prior to 1960. I still apply that in 2010. There is nothing wrong in it. Please do not mistake me. But the point is, in the name of great research, in the name of new development, in the name of new different kind of things, we are repeatedly applying these kind of principles. The queuing, if I take, one of the first papers was probably from 1905, applied in telephony. And we continue to apply that, whether it is a supermarket queue or any of these. I mean, how different can it be in fundamentals than it was, let's say, 100 years ago or 120 years ago? Optimization, people know it, it has been sort of ripped apart from different researchers. If you see, like in hardware, we say microprocessor based, you can almost say optimization off. You can almost say machine learning with, and so on. Then the tragedy of this is we are pouring public money into this, and a lot of our money is going into this 99%. Now, just to give a comparison, don't hold me these numbers fully in the sense, I'll make a little remark when I show this a bit later. This is the first cut that I drew from financial statements of universities and the number of people that they have produced. So I have taken cost per degree awarded. So in 2019. So if in India, typically for the amount of money that the university gets from all sources, it is about 1.15 crore per student. Just think back. I'm spending nearly 1.2 crores per student to educate that person, to make that person useful. Is it really happening? And if you take the purchase power parity, it is even larger. We are spending about $500,000 PPP when we are talking about an Indian student in our good universities. Not so good ones, maybe 1/10 of that, but then the quality may be 1,000. So I'm talking about some of the best universities. If you take Europe, a top university there is spending about 0.28 million as against 0.157 million. And if you take PPP, they are spending even less than ours. But this European university is very special because they're producing a lot of master students. So if you take it only for PhDs, this will increase. In India, this particular university is producing more PhDs than MTechs. Therefore, the numbers are a little skewed. So if you take proper weighting factors for this will still be not too bad, far. And in USA, it is costing about $1 million per student. So what this shows is, with all the money that we are spending on research, it is really turning out to be an extremely expensive process. If you show it to the government, they say reduce this cost, but that's not going to be easy. But the fact is that we are spending a lot of money. There is another way of looking at it. If you take cost per faculty member in these universities, India is spending about 2.22 crores per annum per faculty member. That's about, I mean, I'm considering, when I say cost, it is a total cost of the entire university. I'll qualify this a little more, as I told you, when I go to a third slide about cost. So it's about $0.3 million per faculty, which turns out to be roughly 1 million per faculty PPP. Now look at Europe. It's a nice place to be there because they spend more money on faculty members. So maybe you should get a job in Europe. Not all European countries, but some of the major universities, they spend a lot more. And US is not very different from India if you particularly take PPP. They're spending about $1 million per faculty member, and in India, we are spending about $1 million PPP. So the first part, therefore, was that we have all this research, we are spending a lot of money, we are spending a lot of things, and then if you turn it into actual figures of how we are spending money on per person or per resource that we have generated, it seems to be extremely expensive. And it turns out that it is not really much cheaper than what West is spending, in spite of all the things that we talk about. If you really put it, please take these numbers with caution. Those of youngsters who want to study this, download the financial statements of many universities. It is open source. And then look at the number of students that graduate, and then look at the kind of size of the university, and then you will get these numbers. The second aspect of research, we are going to spend a lot of time on this, is the publications. After all, we say that research would have to produce publications. So the dictum, unfortunately for many, it started with the secret of my success is comprised in 3 words: work, finish, and publish, by Michael Faraday. This he said around 1850 or so. So he did a lot of work. He finished a lot of work, very important. He didn't leave it halfway. And then he published a lot. But why he did that, we are missing the point. Why publish or not is the following. Publish only if you have a new result and an original result, or an original method. Refine or reinterpret published results. If you can do that, yes. Most of us take recourse to this particular dot and say, we have refined somebody's result, but you know what I mean. It is a serious refinement and a serious reinterpretation. Then review the field or summarize a particular project. Subject findings to scientific rigor. Put them out, let people check, come back whether you have done it well or not. Then you don't publish when material is of no scientific interest. I mean, there was some marginal thing. Then work out of date. You publish on something which is very old. And then duplication of previously published work. And then incorrect or not acceptable conclusions. And if there is a chance of plagiarism, which I have not put here. Now, the original intent of publication, therefore, taking on from Faraday, was dissemination and for assessment of true worth of publication. If I publicize and some people come and say, no, your paper is wrong, it would be extremely good. I mean, good for science, good for individuals to learn. Then the original intent of publication was to spawn research in new areas. Higgs' paper, which is just 1.5 pages, it spawned maybe 2,000 papers. I haven't counted, but this is my guess. Maybe there are 2,000 to 3,000 papers. Einstein's 1905 and 1915 papers has spawned probably about 10,000 new papers and new investigations. And then generally contribute to the understanding of the universe. This is the original intent people had. Now, so this is a statement, I couldn't help putting this. You will see who said this. Mathematics is that peculiar science in which importance of a work can be measured by the number of earlier publications rendered superfluous by it. Just apply this criterion to any science other than mathematics. You will find that my entire work, I need not have been born at all. My entire work is simply a waste. And this was said by Hilbert, none other than Hilbert. And interestingly, in our Indian system, the famous grammarians, Panini and subsequently, they have nearly said the same thing. They said grammar is a word in which the newer development takes over the previous one, and the new development simply makes the previous work superfluous. So if you learn grammar of the 18th century, it completely overshadows all the grammar that you learned from Panini's time. Look at those researchers. They wrote a lot of things on grammar, and they said, what I write now is current now. And if somebody comes 100 years later and replaces it, completely change over to him. So that is the kind of spirit of this publication that we had. And then this was by another famous researcher. You know that I write slowly. This is chiefly because I am never satisfied until I have said as much as possible in a few words, and writing briefly takes a lot more time than writing at length. And this was Frederick Gauss. So the purpose of publication on one side for dissemination, cross-check, improvement of science, repeat things and so on. On the other side, it was also whether I have really contributed anything by rendering the previous work superfluous. I mean, you don't have to make it superfluous in all these fields, but basically understand it better. And if you see even economic theories, they have more recent theories have become they have made the previous theories superfluous. And Charles Darwin, in one sweep, he simply removed everything that happened till 1850. So the purpose of publication is to really make a very impactful contribution to the science. So now we switch to why do we publish now? Mainly to progress in academic world, mostly, but sometimes it is also in other worlds, like in industry and other places. And interestingly, Russia, in their Communist Party, they had a habit that to become somebody in Communist Party, you had to have an original publication, and it had to be approved by the committee. And Stalin, for a long time, did not have a thesis of that kind, and he did not write till Lenin was dead. And after Lenin was dead, he wrote a very nice book called something on Leninism. I think it is called. Yeah, anyway, come to me. And then because Lenin is dead, nobody can say anything more than that. And he was the closest friend, and that was approved by the Communist Party. And then he became somebody in the Communist Party. So it is not only in the academic world, here and there you will find that it has something to do with the career growth. Then augment the number of publications, particularly youngsters, they are under tremendous pressure, more the merrier, and what they are, it is of no consequence. To get as high H index as possible, compete for funding and the HAE scales. Fortunately, HAE scale has been taken out in the 7th Pay Commission, and also that scale has been manipulated and managed in a different way. But nevertheless, you compete for funding and this hires, and then you want to belong to an elite club and get selected to elite scientific societies. This is something which we want to do publishing for now. And the modern intent is, therefore, the modern intent of the university, I want to put side by side. Universities pursue entrepreneurship. Just pause over this. In the past, about 100 years back, many entrepreneurs supported a university, not because they wanted entrepreneurs, but they wanted their fields to be investigated. If you take Tata, who started Indian Institute of Science, he put a lot of money to start departments of chemistry and a department of electrical engineering in those days in the beginning, because in his view, for India's growth at that point of time, these two domains were extremely important. So it was not to make 100 new electronic industries or electrical industries that he did. He said generally studying electricity and studying metallurgy and chemistry was very important to the growth of the country. And whether you take Carnegie or those who supported Harvard or MIT, all of them had such intentions. They made a lot of money either in banking or in automobiles or in oil or so. But they never came and said, I want thousands of entrepreneurs in oil. They put money because I have a lot of money. And for the growth of the country, it is important that we pursue a lot of new knowledge. They did not say new oil fields. They did not say new electrical machines. Then they act for wealth creation and profits. This is again a relatively new concept. By relatively, I mean about 100 years back. And they started with, and they stand for regional interests. Again, note that universities are universal, but these are very regional. And we are even fighting for admissions in the local space in these days. And then they have very useful biases, their own biases. I will leave it at that vaguely. Just think about it. Think about biases that your own university or even our working place is happening. So if you look at the transformation, what has happened is they are marginally concerned with gaining knowledge, really. I mean, there are a few, but that's still less important. Fundraising institutions are the modern day paradigms. You have to have hefty tuition fee, large research grants. I'm not talking about India alone. Today, if you see the numbers, 2021 annual tuition fee in MIT is $500,000, $0.5 million. I mean, do you want to really pay? I mean, what do you get out of it? And slowly, I think people are already disillusioned. And then I don't know what they're doing. They on top of it claim that the student fee that they collect is less than 10% of their annual expenditure. Then what are we doing? And why do you even charge the 10%? But nevertheless, students who want to go and do anything they're even paying very hefty tuition fee. Things are not different in India on a lower scale, but I think it is hefty for the people who want to pursue knowledge. And large scale research grants, then they're all publication factories. Actually, they have become some newspaper printers rather than any true publications. And an ideal professor who is honored today is a fundraiser, is a massive publisher, and well-networked person. If you have these three qualities, the person can do anything one wants. So this is the ideal professor that a university wants. And research and teaching make a battle for the market share. So that what I mean is, if you say that I'm doing great research, if you say I'm doing great teaching, then it is only for getting the market from the whole system, not really to claim any great research. So research is meaningful only if it is described already, if someone else can use it, it arouses other scientists' interest and allows others to reproduce results. Note that all these things are, again, fundraising related to them. And as one biologist remarked very wryly, he said, a drug is a substance which, if injected to a rabbit, produces a paper. So it was quoted by this Albert Georgi, It is from the International Journal of Quantum Biology Symposium. So this is what has happened. You take a drug, inject it to a rabbit, and out comes a paper, then you are done. And what the original intent of the drug is, and what is the original intent of doing this kind of a project, and so on, is becoming not meaningful anymore at all. So we have redefined only measurable outputs are for faculty career and university ranking. A competition created by governments and other agencies for funding, and as many publications as possible. Relevance is less important, or demand for a high value patent. Then taste for science has therefore changed to taste for publications. Now, if you see why we don't publish now, if at all, if there is an argument, one is none of these intentions that I mentioned are possible. It helps only to advance a field without bringing accolades to anybody. Then the process is honest and very long, because people have to cross-check. For instance, Andre Weil's proof of Fermat's theorem, I believe it took 2 to 3 years. So it is a long process. I mean, okay, you publish and you wait. And after 3 years, somebody might say that it is useless. Professor Vittal Rao has been sending me some articles of a man who has claimed that he has solved old conjecture, of late 19th century. And it is awaiting for now, what, 7, 8, 9 years without proof. So you are not going to honor that person that he has solved that problem, that Riemann's conjecture, hypothesis, because it has not been proven. So its process is honest and it is long. People are not going to say you have solved the problem. Then it is not worth publishing. The corresponding research requires considerable effort, obviously. Then you don't bother to publish. Now, so what has happened in the process is this publication has become an explosion, and it is, in my opinion, a Ponzi scheme. I create 10 papers with my 10 research students who are going to generate similar 10 papers each in a totally irrelevant and unwanted space. And this is a Ponzi scheme that we are guaranteeing everyone with all the money. Sorry if I use strong language, but that's how I feel about it. So this is what is happening. Explosive scientific publishing, whatever be the content, whether it is green, blue, or red, it is going to result in a journal publication ultimately, and it is all cooked in some way, and then whether it is reproducible, whether it is useful, is not clear at all. Now, if you take the peer-reviewed journal growth, it has been continuously, explosively exponential. This diagram is what I would like to call Intel's diagram. Intel's famous Intel factories diagrams, they neither define x-axis or y-axis, there is only a curve. So it's a bit like that. But anyway, it still gives you a gist. What we have on the x-axis is the time, and the starting point is the first publication in the Royal Society of London, way back in 1695 or so. And then this is up to about year 2000, and this trend has continued. If at all, there is an upward slight slope, increase in slope. So the philosophical, I mean, the number of titles launched in this area, 1665 to 2001, has simply become explosive. They exploded. And so we'll talk a little more about that explosion in a moment. I just want your attention on one issue. All these journals publish so-called peer-reviewed papers. So these are some of the pictures that people have done for peer review. Look at this. It is a very nice diagram. Poor man, his head is even uncovered, and there are nice clubs all around with sharp instruments. And he has to pass through 6 of them, not getting hacked till his paper is accepted. This peer review is supposed to be double blind. There is even what is called a triple blind process. There is a panel of reviewers, there are editorial boards and so on. And look at what Einstein said once. We, Rosen and he had sent a paper, had sent you our manuscript for publication and had not authorized you to show it to the specialists. Look at that. He takes the view that peer review that they did was stupid because they sent it to specialists before it was even printed. I see no reason to address, obviously that reviewer had sent some comments. I see no reason to address, in any case, erroneous comments of your anonymous expert, the famous anonymous expert. On the basis of this incident, I prefer to publish the paper elsewhere. And respectfully, Albert Einstein. He's still great of this man to be still respectful. So you see, this is what is happening with peer review. there are two aspects of it. One is you are disclosing it to people before it is printed so that anybody can take it and walk away with it, if that's possible. And apart from that, many of the reviewers do not know what they are reviewing. So like they sent this erroneous comment. And for the record, Peter Higgs' second paper was also rejected. And he received his Nobel Prize exactly at the same place where it was rejected. So this can happen. I mean, I'm not saying that all my papers were that good that the peers misunderstood, but typically it is not really foolproof. So this is what has happened with the academia. You publish is what they said. Then they said publish or perish. Then they said publish in high impact journals or perish. And now they're saying publish frequently in high impact journals and maybe you won't perish. And the fellow is already down on his knees and I think he's slowly crawling towards his grave. Some nice cartoons, what happens in the peer review process. You can see this in my presentation later. I don't want to read through this, but there are a lot of hilarious jokes about this. And look at this man, poor soul, beaten down by peer reviews. So the downside of the peer review is not my cartoon. Somebody wrote really. Number one, there is a strategic citing and pricing. I mean, if you particularly know approximately where the reviews happen, and nowadays it is not, I mean, with all your triple, quadruple blind and so on, you still get a feel for who is actually reviewing you. So then you do a strategic citing for this. And in some cases, I have even seen people saying that I have reviewed your paper, but you have not quoted me. So include this as one of your top quotations. And then there is no deviation from established theories. Therefore, you have to go by citing and pricing past people. So how can you do anything new? Then you focus more on form than content. Is it two column and then does it follow all the standard practices of reference? I mean, there's absolutely nothing on content. And this is very common. Many of you may have experienced this. There is a revenge of frustrated experts. Some experts who have become reviewers, they suffered through reviewing the past 10 years. Then they said, I'm going to make my next 10 years miserable for the papers that I received. So Freeman Dyson said, most of the crackpot papers which are submitted to the physical review are rejected, not because it is impossible to understand them, but because it is possible. Those which are impossible to understand are usually published when, which are impossible to understand are usually, when the great innovation appears, it'll almost certainly be in a muddled, incomplete and confusing form. For any speculation which does not at first glance look crazy, there is absolutely no hope. So what he's saying is, unless if your publication looks a little impossible, a little crazy, then probably it will not get published. Publication has been extended for beyond our present ability to make real use of the record. This is Vannevar Bush, who is one of the pioneers in funding universities for research. So the new value is therefore promotions, fundraising, networking, and talk about sustainable universities, ranking. Instead of sort of worrying about other things, we are worried about ranking. I did not add one thing here, which I thought was very Indian, and it will offend a lot of people. It is placement. That is also the new value. So look at some of the things people have said. Erwin Shagrafi is apparently a good researcher. He said that so-and-so, a researcher, he's a very busy man and half of what he publishes is true, but what I don't know is which half. Then he also, in another case, the paper contains much that is new and much that is true. Unfortunately, what is true is not new and what is new is not true. And the very bulk of scientific publication is itself delusive. It is often it has very unequal value. A large proportion of it, possibly as much as 3/4, I would go as high as 95%, does not deserve to be published at all. And it is only published for economic considerations from which have nothing to do with the real interest of science. And this is by J.D. Bernal, who was a reactionary and who was a great scientist and a British scientist, and who was supposed to participate in Second World War efforts, and they did not, including because he was considered a strong leftist and a communist. But he was a true scientist, and then he said that in 1939, and it has quadrupled or I don't know, become 8 times now. So if you do some reality checks, most of these publications are not of slightest importance to anybody outside the academic system. I'm coming heavily upon that. I look at my own publications. None of them are worth really referring to. In most articles also the opposite of what has been proved can also be proved. Typically, this is in social sciences. If somebody has said this is the cause, and you must have seen one day a particular cholesterol is bad, next day that cholesterol is good. And today covaxin is bad, tomorrow covaxin is good. So the opposite can be proved, and it would no longer change the course of the world at all. Is that a good publication? Is that a good research? The drive towards numbers has created a culture of numbers, algorithmic calculation of data. This faith in accuracy, independence, and efficiency of metrics is misplaced. And this is the International Joint Committee on Qualitative Assessment of Research said. And there are also other kind of things. German Foundation said that they seem objective and surrounded by aura of hardly disputable authority, but there's a naive trust in numbers, and there's a fatal misbelief which each faculty should counteract. You see what they're saying. The naive trust in numbers is a fatal misbelief which each faculty member should counteract. So some fallacies that we have seen have an impact factor. I don't want to spend too much of time. It was started by this Thomson Scientific. This has gone to a completely disproportionate level at this point. So what is the result of all this? That is, we have brought a lot of money, do a lot of research, published a lot of rubbish. Number one, most publications are of very limited relevance, and they're often useless. Then there is an avalanche of irrelevant publications. Most research is and can be forgotten. Most designs that we make as practical implementers, they don't even get tested. They don't even see the light of the day. There is a big loss of resources. This 99% that I mentioned probably is a conservative number. Then increased one-manship and academic politics is what it has resulted in, and very little benefit to society that supports research. So some fallouts: scientist is treated like a screwdriver, a screw salesman. The more screw he has sold, the better he is. Then there is what is called a salami tactic. The new ideas are cut as thin salami slices in order to maximize the number of publications. I am a strict vegetarian. I don't know what salami is really, but apparently it is a meat dish which can be served in slices. And they are sliced like this. So you take one big result, slice it into 10 and publish 10 papers rather than 1 or 2. And then increase the number of authors per publication, make it as wide as possible. One per article in 1957 has risen to something like almost 4 in 2008 in a specific discipline. And then increasing specialization between 100,000 specializations to 130,000 journals in about a span of about 20 years. And this is also the hilarious thing that happens. Whatever happens, you want a publication. My friends, as a result of our experimentation, we have lost a dear colleague. On the other hand, we have just gained a publication. So as long as you gain a publication, you do whatever you like. Even murder is acceptable. There is one statement which I want to conclude this part by showing you this. I have to keep going as there are always people on my track. I have to publish my present work as rapidly as possible in order to keep in the publication race. The best sprinters of this in this road of investigations are Henry Becquerel, and Curie's. This was said in 1895 by Lord Kelvin. If Kelvin says that he has a problem and he has to publish fast, you can imagine about all the other mortals that we have in this world. Just to again put a perspective in the cost, I again calculated the paper published in 2019 and divided the money they spent. In India, it is costing about 37 lakhs per publication, PPP $170,000, Europe, and then USA. You see the figures are not very different. Now, this is where I said I would make a comment. The cost I have shown in 3 places all result in from a single fund. So you can say that the total outcome of the funding that we have done are this many students, this many faculty, and this many papers. So even if you distribute your cost between the 3 outputs that I have shown, between the 3 things that I have shown, and distribute it equally, which is not fair, but equally. Look at the cost of a publication in India. It's coming to something like about 12 lakhs. If I distribute it equally, 12 lakhs, or in PPP terms, it is about $60,000. Just think back, 99% or even 99.5% of the publications which has come out of our country, each spending about 12 lakhs. Does it really have any value at all to anyone? Should we not be concerned about this? So this is the problem. This is what kept me awake for many hours in the night. So these concerns are not only just mine. These are expressed in these papers, in these various records. You can look at all of them. And one point here about the first reference I will come to in a moment. The third part is that why did this happen? There is one major contributor to this, and that is the publication industry. I want to say a few things about it, but Professor Balram has covered this extensively in a lecture. Search for research results, research process or so by Professor P. Balram on YouTube. You get a beautiful 1 hour lecture which covers all the points I'm going to make. So I'm not going to say that in detail, just give a few small things. Number one, this is the only industry, I'm talking about scientific publishing, which has a 40% profit margin today with a over $10 billion revenue. This is figure from 2019. They had shown a $784 million of profit over $2 billion of revenue. Give me one industry anywhere in the world where you have this kind of revenues and this kind of profit margin. Why is that? Because there are industry inputs. By industry, I mean the publishing industry. Where are the inputs? There are free writers. They don't pay anybody. And you spend all the money from government and all hard-earned money you have from many places and publish papers for free. And the reviewers are free. No reviewer is paid any money. Then the publication cost was already low and it has come down further with all the online publications. What are the outputs of the industry? Lots of rubbish. You can discount all of them. Revenue through subscriptions. I think all of you, particularly heads of the institutions, you are aware, you're spending tons of money to subscribe to these journals. There is one American university which spends 90% of the budget on library on this rubbish industry. You had to spend so much of money to have access. I mean, compared to that, our IEEE Explorer and others are relatively better. But if you take Springer or Elsevier and a few others, they have tough, big subscriptions that you pay. Then you pay publication fee. It is not really free for writers. They say 3 pages or whatever, and then per page. And I believe in some cases, it is as much as $2,000 per publication that you have to pay. And for reading, some of you might have seen, you search and you get a paper which you think you are interested. You go and click and you say, buy access. And access per reading is anywhere from $30 to $40, depending on the paper. And there is, if you want to print it out, there's an additional fee. So the fellows are making humongous amount of money. And this was started by one Maxwell, who was the originator of the scientific publishing industry in UK. And he made tons of money and he was a real classical cheater. And this goes on. It goes on even now, whether it is Springer or Elsevier. Then what has happened is, now there is this is the fourth point, is because of us stupid fellows from university, because there is a large number of publications you want and not everyone can publish good papers. There has been a rise of predatory journals where lots have come up because it is a free industry. You publish for free review, if there is any review at all, and then free publication, but make money on this whole thing, on the publication fee and so on. And these predatory journals, you must be getting every day at least about 10 to 15 mails saying that, why don't you publish with us? Why don't you publish with us? And so on. And so this has happened. And these predatory journals, I have said new and converted because the new journals are fine. But the old journals, like the Cell in Biology, which Professor Balram quotes, and Nature, they have also become money spinners. If you want to become a member of Nature, it is not easy. It's so many. In fact, I find that some of the things like Atlantic, for instance, which is a very popular journal in United States, talking about public life, is free, whereas these people charge you. Then There is also a predatory recruitment of high-value publishers. Again, I'll give you an example from what Professor Balram quoted. Cell was a magazine started by this group, that Maxwell that I told you. What he did was he recruited the Nobel laureate in biology of that year and said, start this magazine. You are the chief editor and publish your 3 papers. The moment you do that, everyone says, oh, Cell must be a great thing. And over a period of time, everyone wants to publish in Cell. That is where you monetize. And the kind of ugly story about this Maxwell is worth reading, but nevertheless, that is not the point here. This industry, which is bleeding us by taking away money from government, from universities, from everyone, writers and reviewers, they are the ones who are growing, and they are also responsible for this irresponsible publication that we have in the world today. This whole Ponzi scheme is also because of that. If you want more details, kindly refer to Professor Balram's lecture on YouTube. So this is a cartoon that they give. An innocent looking fellow started his life and then became a researcher and finally contributed to the Maxwell's paradigm of, this Maxwell is different Maxwell, not our James Clerk Maxwell. This was another, in fact, he was actually, I think, a Polish or a Czech man who came to UK and changed his name to Maxwell. So he's the one who led to this kind of a thing. Okay, all this we said, very negative. What can we do? Some action. I'll quickly go through this. Yeah, I have 2 minutes, so I'll just try to take it up in maybe 3 minutes I'll take to finish this. So as a researcher, what can we do? First is it all negative? I was looking at it completely negatively. So I was trying to see what are the positive things about the present research. Number one, we are still preparing human resources capable of carrying out research. So if a student carries out research for 5 years, somewhere you teach the research methods, somewhere you say what is correct or not, and then you even talk about ethics and all that, even if it is not followed completely, but you make some effort. Then we are preparing researchers to be immersed in their areas. 5 to 6 years, they are immersed in that area. And Louis Pasteur said once that if you have a prepared mind, then like a lightning strikes, you may get a new idea. So what we are doing is, for all these researchers, for 5 or 6 years, they are immersed in one area. However poorly it is, we are still immersing them, giving them a lot of opportunity to read and understand. And therefore, some of them may emerge with some new ideas, as Louis Pasteur said. This is a good benefit. Third, we are creating enough resources to teach in the universities. In fact, there is an overproduction. Only about 20% of the researchers, PhD students, find job in universities all over the world, and also in India. So though we have created this, we have overdone a little bit, but anyway, nevertheless, this is an important contribution to the country. So you can ask, what do you want me to do as a faculty member? First is follow your conscience and play the game. Understand the value of your own publications. As I boldly say, my publications have no value today. Can you come up with saying that, no, it's not so bad? I had 3 which were good and 30 which were bad. Can we do that? Can we really follow our conscience? Instead of sending an impressive list to get what is called the Life Achievement Award somewhere. Then encourage open access. Talk about open access as far as possible. I think we have gone away from this. Even Berkeley and Stanford, as recently as even 5-10 years back, they were doing a lot of open access work. At least a few truly valuable publications you try. You really say, I don't want to publish unless I have really value here. And one big researcher, Professor Whittleraw and KNB also, they know, but I will mention the name later in their present. He said that only 5% of my publications have real value. And the rest of crap is what he's told me personally in a discussion. And he was a very famous and prodigious author with a H index of over 75. And then he produced something like 500 papers. And look at that. Great that it is at least 5% of 500. So that is 25 papers of value in 25 years. That is not bad at all. So we can even target something like this. Can publications be limited to 2 or 3 authors? Don't crowd it and then make everyone. Try to work on this. So what can I do? My opinion, we should teach well. There is no compromise on this. And teach expertise, teach skill, make it broad, make it deep. Then teach mathematics, problem solving. We are shunning mathematics in many of, even as faculty members, I think we should not do that. In fact, I'm ashamed to say that I have a colleague in the institute who said, my course is something where other than multiplication and addition, you don't require anything, including division and subtraction. I mean, that is stupid. I think we should really teach mathematics. We should teach really engineering, design, solutions, and so on. I'm saying design engineering because by and large, I thought all the audience today are engineers. We are not teaching them design. We are not teaching the solutions. We are teaching everything but this. Then let's take small problems. For instance, there is an amusing paper written by two authors 20 years back of applying Newton's cooling to tea and coffee making. They were saying, they were investigating a problem like, if I have black coffee and I want to add milk, should I keep it as black and then add sugar milk, if I had to do it after 15 minutes, or is it better to mix and keep it for 15 minutes if I'm drinking later? Looks like a stupid, simple problem, but it turned out that you had to apply a lot of Newton's law of cooling to find out what is better. The good side of that was, in a problem like this, you understood a lot of interesting things. And then it mattered to no one that it really was a serious problem. But the understanding and the doing research was very important. Then we can take real research to classroom. My colleague, he runs a course on IoT. And I'm very happy to say that a lot of things that happen in the IoT course has led to a couple of industry products. Not many people can say that my classroom has led to industry products. Then slowly rise the bar of career growth, just not based on publication numbers. We can do that. I'm not saying do it tomorrow, but then slowly we can do that. And a bit more. My strong recommendation is write books, not to cover a syllabus. Don't look at the syllabus of some university, but incorporate all your research findings. Hard to do, right? Unless I have good research, what book will I have? So, but I think it is worthwhile looking at it. They're hoping that 20 years from now, I'm going to write a book. Then what shall I put in that book? What should be my research, which will actually be condensed in the form of a great, nice book. Then write technical reports, monographs, design guides. In fact, my own department had a very big a role in monographs. We wrote something like 40 monographs in the days where we were only cyclostyled it. And believe me, they were the most demand. I mean, they were the publications which were in most demand. And we sold any number of these monographs, and we purposefully did not convert them into textbooks and did not take it to a publisher to make it into anything wider. They had to write to us to CDT. We would send the monographs at a cost price, at very low cost and so on. We had a microprocessor, two courses, two monographs costing 20 rupees each. Can you imagine these kind of things? And design guides and so on. Then thesis of scholars can be raised slowly to a higher level. We keep telling students that, no, this is not good enough. Please do more. Not to pressurize that person, but to take him or her to a higher level. And concentrate on implementation of based publications, particularly for engineers. It cannot only be theory, but make an implementation, show that it works. Then as a head of institution, what can I do? Develop a scheme to measure the real contribution, integrate salami slices into a whole salami for measurement. Don't encourage salami slices. Then give a balanced weight for all the real good contributions like research, publications, fundraising, teaching, scholarship, and so on. Scholarship is something interesting, which is also to be included. Then reiterate the true values of the university and its raison d'etre repeatedly to your faculty, particularly the newcomers, the new recruits. They must be told why are they there, what is the university, why would they like to do things in the following manner. Then we can award only real impactful work, not necessarily based on the publications only. Abolish awards for the work of the self-serving 99%. If I say this, it amounts to almost all the things in the country. Even look at all the Padma Shris and all that we got in the last 20 years. What is the real contribution? Should we, and nowadays you institute an award because you want to give an award to some person for his or her pride. So abolish that and support excellence, however small the work is. And then find appropriate award mechanism. I have said that, I'm reiterating that. And then based on real quality of publications, patents, and design, in high quality publication come out, give it the highest priority. It may happen once in 3-5 years for a faculty member, but give it a lot of weight. Consider innovations in teaching, dynamism in curriculum, and participation in actual work. participate in quality consulting, and publication numbers to receive a much lower weight than what is happening. Some of the universities, I have sent a couple of links to Professor Murthy and to Professor Vitterlov also. They have started doing it from 2012 onwards in some of the Netherlands universities. I find Netherlands extremely intriguing in the sense they are some of the people who takes drastic steps, and their mechanism to promote is completely different. So I am done. I'm sorry if I exceeded the time, and then I'm open to questions. But I think everyone asking will not be practicable. So maybe send a couple of questions by
Yes.
just one, and then if somebody can read out, then
Yes, sir. This is Banga here, sir. I will read out.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, there is one question by Dr. Srinivas A, Dean of School of Engineering at DSU.
Yeah.
The question is this, sir. For long, knowledge acquisition has been the prime goal, and patents are a natural outcome of the deep knowledge. But today, there is a hurry to apply for patents and less attempts towards knowledge acquisition. Could you please comment on this new trend?
Have I not commented enough?
There are, sir.
Answered, sir. Commented already. Commented.
It is absolutely rubbish that we do this. But I have a slightly worse word for patent. If you look at universities in the past, patent was not something that you, because by very nature, you are funded publicly, you are a public servant, and what you do is a public good. In fact, even hospitals were actually in universities. And when you go to a hospital in a university, you get free treatment. That has gone. And even this patent is something absolutely stupid. And I don't know why we should even apply for that. And it is a job of industry. So let industry come to you, interact with you, give you money, and let them patent. Or, I mean, I'm saying something drastic, but I think I have commented enough on all these aspects. And I don't think I want to add anything more.
Sir, there is a second question by Professor Sanjay Chitnis, again from DSU. Sir, what is your advice to researchers in BITES colleges about publishing in Indian journals such as Journal of IASC or Sadhana?
First of all, I am no one to give advice, but my suggestion, there is nothing like selecting a particular journal. A journal has to be of high quality, and then it should not belong to that predatory journal list that I found. And our government's way of solving the problem is UGC is announcing which are the journals where we can publish. And the moment you make a list like that, I can go and try influencing them, include my journal for publication and so on. No, that should not be the case. Have you looked at all the papers in these journals? Do you consider them as, do you have respect for them? Do you have a high rating for them? Do you like them, and do you think it is really impartial and all the things that we said earlier? If that is the case, go ahead and publish. It need not be Indian or Western or whatever. You can do it. And in case it is not, even a American journal which is publishing is of no value. So I would say it is not targeting Indian journals or anything like that. Look at the journal. Honestly, are you really convinced about their publication record? Then I see a question from, again, Professor Sanjay Chetnis. For Faculty of Engineering, should develop the artifacts be primary output and publications secondary one? Again, you see, I mean, this is very hard to say, because look at the OFDM paper, which I said spawned a new whole lot of research. When that paper was published on OFDM, it was a paper. They had no OFDM modem to illustrate their principle. Or even better, 1938 paper on PCM, pulse code modulation. There was no way they could implement PCM pulse code modulation for about 30 years after that. But it is a great idea that you can work it out for something which is actually for the future. So to rule out that primary publication should be primary is not correct. On the other hand, if the publication is a tweak of something small, then it is not worth it. If the publication is something really contributory, either by a analysis or by any other design or anything which really contributing, then I think it should be published. It can be considered on par. And you can also have artifacts made which are actually absolutely useless. So again, my response to this is, we will not make prescriptions. We will only look at all the time. I think we are a bunch of intelligent people. When we look at an artifact, we can look at a publication. We can easily say whether it has value or not. If you have doubts, form a group of people who can actually do this, who have plenty of experience in this. Then they can tell you whether it is valuable. That is, what I'm saying is bring in quality as a measure. What is happening is that is missing from the whole system. So bring in quality by great people who have done a lot of things in research, people who have done a lot of good work, and they will be able to guide you to do this. So I would not prescribe that only publication or only artifact. Let it be everything together. Then there is a question by Professor Sudha.
Yeah.
Aerospace engineering, what are the best journals for publication? I will refer you to Professor Jagadish, but again, I think I have answered that in a different way earlier.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Professor Sridhara, can we submit PhD thesis if really innovative without publication with a 99% with this 99% background? What do you mean? I mean, if there is a really innovative thing that is new, yes, you can certainly go ahead and submit a thesis. For instance, right now, I think today or tomorrow, there is an examination of a PhD thesis from my department, which actually talks about design of something with micro needles. It is a complete design thesis, which actually talks about a very innovative design, mainly for these needles, which have to be 50 microns diameter kind of thing. So yes, that is a great work, and go ahead and publish it. When I said 99%, what I refer to is all these things that we have accumulated, which can be thrown out and our libraries can be cleared. So, I mean, for space. So I'm talking about those kind of things. Again, kindly take a judgment call. Is your work really innovative? Is your publication, does it have some value to people? And if you cannot judge yourself, look at people who have done a great job, and then they will sort of guide you to do these kind of things. And there is one more from Sudha. How do we go for patent like is it when pursuing our research? If you have a good idea, we're eligible, or do we need to finish a complete PhD? Yeah, okay. I mean, I have answered this partially again. The normal standard rule is that if you want to use the same result for your thesis as well as for patent first and then write the thesis. That is because PhD, even today, with all the negative things that we talked about, PhD thesis is public property. The moment it is published, anybody can refer. They can ask you for your thesis. And if it contains an idea which you think is patentable, then it belongs to everyone. Therefore, if you have an idea which is both patentable and publishable, patent first and then publish. So I hope I have answered this. And sir, I would really like Professor Jagadish, Professor Vittal Rao, and Professor Murthy to add or subtract or throw me out, whatever.
Vittal Rao, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm still recovering from the shock that Jamdagni has presented. Yes, I agree with whatever Jamdagni said. You see, there are many problems. Of course, there is, as a mathematician, I think mathematicians are a bit different animals. They are very blunt. They dismiss wrong result as rubbish without any hesitation. And
I should have been a mathematician.
I mean, this is a very, but they're also open-minded. Even if a theorem, for example, even if a theorem is proved, they keep questioning whether it is really true, whether any improvement can be made, and so on and so forth. So they are not the younger animals in mathematics are not afraid of the fact that, for example, Gödel proved the result about the continuum hypothesis, that it cannot be disproved. And similarly, Cohen proved that the continuum hypothesis cannot be proved also. So when these two guys had said it 50, 60 years back, I don't think in other fields anybody would have even bothered. But a couple of young fellows today, just this year, have come up with an answer saying that, yes, I can disprove continuum hypothesis.
and they have given their own arguments based on a little earlier work. And this is published in Annals of Mathematics, and there's a big debate that's going on now whether it is about whether set theory has been properly axiomatized or whether we need more mathematical axioms and so on and so on. So this debate in maths is much better than any other subject. But that doesn't mean that we are 100% pure or anything like that. There are prejudices, there are fights and all, but we have had great people like Grothendieck, as he said, or for that matter, Paul Erdős used to say, my brain is open. I'm ready to discuss anything. Yeah, I mean, such great people have enriched mathematics, no doubt about it. But as far as the numbers, as I keep telling jocularly to Jamadagni and others in many private conversations, I think India is doing great research in number theory. In the sense that we have numbers for everything. Number of publication, that index number, this index number, and some 100 Scopus journals, and so on and so forth. And we have 10% value for this, 10% for this, 22% for this, 18%. You go for an interview, all these numbers are given to you. You have to give marks for each one. So I think too much importance to these numbers. I always feel that you simply cannot judge quality by quantity. Quality has to be measured only by quality, and you have to have an intuitive feeling for the quality rather than trying to quantify quality. I think this, unless we accept that, we are not going to improve. And nowadays, at least again in math, we in a sense, the math group has reasonably beaten this Maxwellian publication racket, because free exchange of preprints and archive publications is much larger among the mathematicians than any other. I can get most of the fellows put their preprints on their websites, or you can just send them an email, you'll get something from them immediately. So they're a little bit of open society there, because I think mostly mathematicians are interested in solving problems rather than gaining, serious mathematicians, I mean, or rather than gaining all these awards. And in fact, I think probably ours is the only group, mathematicians are the only groups, as Jamadagni said, like Grothendieck, who rejected his funding, or a Perelman who refused $1 million prize, and so on. And so you will find such crazy idiots only in mathematics. Okay. So I think as far as that is concerned, I'm much better area than the others. But overall, I think I agree with most of the things that Jamadagni said. There was a beautiful article which I always refer people to about almost 40 years back. In 1983, Dyson gave a talk to Humboldt Foundation on unfashionable pursuits. Okay, it's an extraordinary lecture. It's available in Math Science, Mathematical Intelligences. But if you want to read that article, you just go to Google, you type unfashionable, you will almost get that. If you don't get it, the next one is pursuits, you will get it. Okay, it's one of the finest articles I've read, and very honest. It tells about even about Institute for Advanced Studies. They were very hesitant to promote Gödel. It took them 12 years to promote Gödel to a professorship. And so he comes down heavily on them and says how certain mandarins decide what is the right direction of research that should be pursued, and so on and so forth. Almost same as Feynman says in his book. You must be joking, Mr. Feynman. Okay, he is another guy who resigned from the academies. He says it's all nonsense. What is all this academics? Yeah. So I think if you look back, before even when Hilbert gave his famous lecture, I think people were working for pride and very passion in research, and only such people were in research. The numbers were small, but the quality was great. But as research has become a profession, science and engineering research has become a profession, the numbers are very high, and the quality is now very low. And I think somewhere along the line, we have to get a proper match between the quality and the quantity. Too many people, unnecessarily, we are forcing people to write papers. Unnecessarily are forcing every college teacher, every university teacher, anybody and everybody in academics should publish a paper. I don't understand why. If a teacher expands the breadth of his knowledge in his subject and is able to make his students interested in many areas, I think that's good enough, much better than publishing a couple of papers that nobody reads. I'll just conclude by one famous article I read about, written by a famous mathematician, Paul Holmos. Many of you might have heard about him. Holmos's measure theory book or linear algebra book, Hilbert space problem book, and so on and so forth. He also has an autobiography of his called I Want to Be a Mathematician. Okay. But he wrote some 2-page article several years ago, I think 30, 40 years back, in either the American Mathematical Monthly, most probably American Mathematical Monthly. The title of the article was What to Write, When to Write, Where to Write. Okay. This is about writing a research paper. And one of the comments he makes was that most 99.99% of the papers have 1.5 readers. Okay, the half a reader is the author. He reads his paper halfway and said, okay, let me send it to publication. Let the referee decide. And then the referee reads half the paper. And then he says, oh, what the hell, let him publish. Let the readers decide. Why should I waste my time on this? Then in those days, the author again gets the galley proof. He reads halfway and said, well, what the hell? If there are mistakes, let the reader find out, and sends it back. So the 3 halves, 1.5 readers, and there the story ends for most of the papers. But unfortunately, he made one prediction that therefore many journals will die a natural death. But that has unfortunately not happened. As Jamadagni pointed out, the journals have increased exponentially. I hope somewhere along the line, the natural death takes place. I think as open access archives and other places where people put their results, and based on how good it is or bad, you will be known or you will not be known. Of course, I am now I belong to a much earlier generation. I think things were very calm and quiet. Even in IISc in those days, people were taken as research assistants or technical assistants. There was no pressure for them to finish a PhD in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. They were allowed to publish something when they had a good result. And so result was the one that drove the publication. Now the demand is for publication. Whether you have result or not, I want a publication. So the number has created the problems. And there perhaps even IISc has suffered as any other this thing is concerned. So as far as my philosophy is concerned, in mathematics, if a students write a PhD thesis, if we clearly and specifically solved a non-trivial problem, for me, that's a good thesis and it can be published. Simply going around, fooling around with 10 problems or 12 problems, making no progress in any problem, doesn't make any sense. If some student comes to me and said, sir, I have finished 4 problems, one more problem, I can write a thesis. I have absolutely no respect for such people. I think I will stop here, let others also, I would like to hear others also.
Jiddi sir?
It was very difficult to say anything, sir, after such a wonderful exposition by Professor Jamadagni and also very insightful comments from Professor Vittal Rao. But I think I would rather advocate a middle path. Things are not so bad. Maybe we all tend to become a little bit cynical as we grow up in our life. Yes, there is a problem. There is a problem of number game and those kind of things are definitely there. But I'm sure the system will take care of that, and slowly the mushrooming journals and the mushrooming irrelevance of nonsensical paper and the way people evaluate will also reach some kind of a balance. But for me, I think I'll just narrate one very interesting thing that Professor Siena Rao once told me when I was traveling with him. He was asking, when two faculty members meet, say in the IASC when they are walking around, if you don't gossip about promotions and other things or about your family, but you start discussing science, then that's a very healthy kind of a situation. And to be very honest, in the first 20 years of our own career, we never bothered too much about these promotions, recognition. But then the joy of doing research is something like a very intoxicating thing, which only people who have experienced would actually enjoy. When you solve a problem which was not solvable, or when you get a new result, or when it gets published in a very top-notch journal, years of work to complete a story. And you don't need anything, because for science, you ask a question and go and find answers to it, and that answer is the greatest reward. And I think campuses, if they can strive back in some way to create an ecosystem where the joy of teaching, the joy of research, if you can bring it back in some way to the campus, I'm not saying it is not there, but it's somewhere getting camouflaged in several places. Automatically, the several problems that Professor Jamdegni so nicely brought out will be will find a natural death, and we will be able to live in a better campuses, because universities are places. See, we all knew that we are coming here for research, because my greatest feedback or greatest reward for me was to find answers to those questions which actually bothered me so much, and lit a fire in my belly which made me passionate to take up research. I mean, those kind of utopian ideas of research is what really drove many of us to take this up. I think as young faculty and youngsters who are in the audience, don't get disheartened or anything. Professor Jamdagni has been very blunt. Yes, you have to be blunt. Science doesn't like polished language. But having said that, we don't have to take the extreme view saying that 99% is nonsense and all. I am sure that maybe Jamdagni is very modest in saying all his papers are useless, but I know how good are his papers, how many of his students have actually contributed, all of that we know, and how much he did as a esteemed faculty member in Indian Institute of Science. Oh, number game, yes, don't play the number game by just sheer numbers, and certainly the publication houses have started doing up. But then all of this, in my view, is a part of evolving society. To say something is absolute is also not right, because the only thing permanent is the change. The value system, belief system, what is good, what is right, all of them in the cycle of evolution, they are all only having temporal, if you would like to use the parallel of turbulence, they all only have intermittent. So that's where it is. And but I would like to thank Professor Jamdagni for some amazing sense of humor in the cartoons that you presented in the lecture. They were very nice. Thank you very much, sir. And it's good that we do have these kind of uh, discussions more often, so that you really trigger the imagination of youngsters, for whom today no longer, I think, research is pleasurable, teaching is pleasurable, and they seem to take it as a burden. I think I joined teaching because I love teaching. I have joined research profession because I love that. I think that is the key to transform the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Kavi?
Good evening. I also agree with many of the points that Professor Jamadagni brought out so well. Just two observations. One is, can we make an argument that research output, whether you measure it in publications or any other tangible thing, is going to be normally distributed? I was just thinking about this. I wrote my first conference paper exactly 30 years ago, and I also have produced 95% or more of what you might call junk. But to produce that 5% which is valuable, since it is normally distributed, you have to naturally produce a lot of other ones which are of lower value. It is not possible to produce only high quality output. That is one possible observation. The other thing is, I think you missed probably one more phenomenon in this research publication where certain keywords carry undue weightage. There is too much importance attached to IEEE or Scopus
Yeah,
and so on. So that also
correct.
is another phenomenon. I don't know if I
Yeah,
missed.
yeah. No, I didn't. I had a view graph on impact, but I didn't have time, so I didn't show it. That is true. They just no. On the first question, should you produce? I mean, can there be a lot of mediocre publications to produce a good? That's a fair point. I agree. It happens, except that in two extreme cases. In case of people like Einstein, what they published was great. They didn't publish any rubbish. So it is possible that a researcher takes a view that I will not publish rubbish. Same with Higgs. Peter Higgs had so few publications that his university did not want to give him a tenure, that kind of a thing. On the other hand, as long as you are not very proudly talking about I being a great researcher for that rubbish 95%, I'm still okay with that.
Right.
And if you see, when you go to any kind of a conference and so on, they will give you a list of papers saying this is what I published. Most of which is junk. Instead of that, if a researcher comes to me and say I published, but this is an important paper that I have done, or that would be fine. What I'm saying is this publishing any kind of a mediocre stuff is taking away that element of introspection. That is the problem. I mean, I fully agree with you. In order to produce at 5%, you have published a lot of it. But then let us be aware of that. And the way things are happening, people take, their credit, even, they want to take credit even for this 95%. That introspection that this is good, this has not been good, this has been published only to meet some requirements. See, I know your institution also has this problem. So if somebody comes and says, hey, I have published because I want to grow, I mean, I have nothing I have no problem. But that realism about what a publication has gone. That is a problem. I have seen publications where there are grammatical errors, I mean, after several reviews. And that is really, for me, disturbing. So I think your point is well taken. Yes, you produce a lot of okay kind of papers, and then some of them turn out to be good. That is what anyway Pasteur said. That's what we said in the beginning. But that could lead to your introspection and saying that, okay, let me do this filtering and let me tell you what I have done well.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much for triggering a kind of thinking, kind of introspection in the researchers. I think I completely agree with most of the points that you mentioned, and I'm sure the participated researchers would understand. The spirit must be taken. The whole idea is quite often we give up quality for the sake of quantity. I think we need to take a relook and say quality is of paramount importance. Let's start looking at it. Second, the essence of the entire talk is that you do not publish anything or do not do anything for the sake of doing it. Rather, you try to develop a passion and try to make a analysis of what is being done by us is going to be useful to the people concerned. And there's a spirit with which we need to move forward. Thank you very much. I'm sure this lots of people have benefited from the lecture, and we'll continue to have this discussion. These discussions are required. I think we can continue to debate and continue to arrive at a kind of situation where we all try to be more responsible in whatever we are going to do. I think that's the point that I would like to draw from this lecture. And we are extremely thankful for a wonderful lecture. I think a lot of data.
Quick response to Professor Jagdish. One quick response to Professor Jagdish, if he's still online.
Yes, sir.
When I claimed that 99%, etc., believe me, I did a survey of last 30 years of publications in my own field, electrical engineering, and compared them with things which have made a difference in electrical engineering. So the best thing I could arrive at was that these 30 years of publication in electrical engineering in the areas that I am familiar with has not brought in any new principle or made any major change in the field at all. I'm making a blanket statement, please pardon me, but that's the problem. On the other hand, it has contributed to a few small things here and there. For instance, there was some analysis of some system that was done, and then it has contributed a little bit to the electricity distribution systems and so on. But these are much more kind of, if I have to be brash again, more like an MTech project. I mean, you give a tool, you say, this is the situation, tell me this is working well, optimize this and that and so on. But really, if you see any major contributions in the electrical engineering domain, in most of the areas, even by the so-called best of researchers in India and abroad. I mean, I know the EPFL director very, very well. So I'm even looking at some of their publications. For instance, one of the criteria would be, has this found its way to a textbook? It has not. None of the things that we have done led to anything in a textbook. Then has it solved a major national, international problem? It has contributed here and there. But what has happened on the positive side is, because of the training in the last 30 years of all these students, we have been able to tackle major issues in the industry and the major issues in the development of the system. Like our electricity system today is far better than what it was, let's say 30 years back. And this has happened mainly because all these people who are there, they have been trained in the more recent. So the training part, making them useful, I think it has worked extremely well. Well, it has worked well. I won't say extreme because there are gaps. But in terms of contribution to the basics of electrical engineering in the domains that I am familiar with, when I say contribution, for instance, there is a tool called NS. It's a tool which we use it for network simulation. It has come from a university. Nothing of that kind has happened from here. And NS is something where you don't do any research. It is simply a tool development to assist research. Then this so-called FPGA is one hardware that we use often. And the first testable and student usable hardware from FPGA came from some of these universities like Berkeley. We have not been able, we did that. I mean, in our lab, we did produce something about 30 years back and tried to do something which is very fundamental to India. But then those efforts are small and far off. So I actually counted, before giving this talk, I was sure that my 99% will cause a lot of problem. And you belong to that 1%, or let's say 5%. So you will not feel it. I belong to the 95 or 99%. So I know that this is what is happening. That is my defense, but you are right. But the contribution towards training people has been humongous. There is no question about that. We have really done well. And all these people whom we have trained as researchers, they have really solved a lot of major problems. Like all our roads are built by our own civil engineers, right? And so that has happened very well.
No, but even on that count, if you say like the satellite program in the country, the atomic program in the country, or the defense program in the country, they have all been immensely successful only because of this training. So it's not a small measure. Yeah. And along with the training, you also did the so-called research, which could have been incremental. See, at the end of the day, the fundamental laws governing the nature, they are all limited. At the end of the day, we are still struggling for a universal.
That is true. That is
so,
true.
Yes, I do agree. You cannot have the spikes are limited and things are like that. But then we don't have to be so critical about our own achievements in some of the things, because, for example, I will tell you the high voltage department, which has been there in institute, the lightning arrestor research that they did, or, for example, Professor Ramanarayan's work, which very few people know on high voltage, which actually is the one which built a massive facility in ISRO by which they test all the tiles which go to the space.
Yeah.
They may not be talked about, But the fact is that Vasudeva Murthy, who is no more, built the first single crystal silicon in the entire world in the laboratory here. Professor Suryan started making silicon far ahead of his time. So we have had, what my point is, we could probably strike a balance and somewhere in the middle, but of late, this is a very serious concern in terms of people producing.
And I want to submit to you that all the examples you quoted are the 1%.
That's fine. I mean, in India, you shouldn't talk about percentage because we are a 1.2 billion population. So in that sense, I think I still believe I am quite positive in saying there is a large number of people. 1% is fine for a population of, say, maybe 10 million.
Don't take it too seriously. It may be
No,
0.1.
I'm not taking it. See, the reason why I mentioned Vasudeva Murthy is if you go to Taiwan, there is an archive there. And they formed an international committee to decide what are the areas that Taiwan should take up. Both Suryan and Vasudeva Murthy are signatories to that committee, which said, please start the silicon foundry.
Yeah. This one.
Now, if you look at it, you feel so sad that in our own country, we have hardly had one or two kind of silicon foundries even today.
Yeah. Suryan was my teacher, and I was told way back in 1946-47, he was telling his class that there is a thing called semiconductor, it's going to revolutionize.
See?
We had such people, certainly.
Far-sighted people.
Yeah. So this is what I felt, and then I presented. So
thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed listening.
Thanks to all the panelists, respected panelists, for your valuable views. We would also like to thank Professor Jamadagni for your very informative and useful lecture, sir. Thank you so much. With the permission of Vice Chancellor, sir, Dr. Banga, sir, shall we close the meeting?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.